Karen Reynolds stood at the entrance of the Grand Meridian Hotel, her designer-wheeled suitcase trailing behind her. The glass doors reflected her image, a well-dressed black woman in her early 40s, wearing a tailored Navy business suit that spoke of success and sophistication. After a 6-hour flight from San Francisco to attend tomorrow's technology conference, all she wanted was to check in and rest. The hotel's grand lobby sparkled with crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Well-dressed guests moved about, their quiet conversations echoing off the high ceilings. Karen noticed how the staff greeted other arriving guests with warm smiles and enthusiastic welcomes. However, as she approached the front desk, the atmosphere shifted noticeably. The young woman behind the counter, whose name tag read Jessica, was chatting animatedly with her colleague. When Karen cleared her throat politely, Jessica's smile faded. She glanced at Karen, then continued her conversation for another minute before finally turning to address her. Yes, Jessica's tone was clipped, her previous warmth nowhere to be found. Good evening, Karen said, maintaining her professional composure. I have a reservation under Reynolds, Karen Reynolds. Jessica typed on her computer with exaggerated slowness, her eyes narrowing at the screen. I don't see any reservation under that name. She didn't bother to hide her skepticism. Karen pulled out her phone and opened her email confirmation. I have the booking reference right here. It's for the presidential suite, confirmed last week. She turned the screen toward Jessica, whose expression shifted from dismissive to confused. Behind her, Karen heard whispers from other staff members. She caught fragments of their conversation. Presidential suite? Must be some mistake. How did she? Jessica's supervisor, a middle-aged man named Robert, approached the desk. He glanced at Karen's phone, then at his computer screen. His forced smile didn't reach his eyes. Ah, yes, Ms. Reynolds. There seems to be a verification issue with the credit card on file. We'll need to run it again. Karen knew this was untrue. Her company's corporate card had already been charged for the full amount. Still, she maintained her dignity and handed over her platinum card. Robert examined it carefully, turning it over multiple times as if searching for signs of fraud. While waiting, Karen observed how another guest, a white man in a rumpled business suit, checked in smoothly at the next counter. No credit card verification issues there. No suspicious glances. No whispered conversations. Finally, Robert processed her card and handed her the key cards to the presidential suite. His instructions were curt. Elevators are to the right. 20th floor. No offer of assistance with her luggage, no information about hotel amenities, none of the usual courtesies she'd observed being extended to other guests. As Karen walked toward the elevators, she heard Jessica mutter to Robert, "Should we alert security to keep an eye on that floor?" The words stung, but Karen had faced similar situations throughout her career. As a senior executive at a leading tech company, she learned to handle discrimination with grace, though it never stopped being painful. Inside the elevator, Karen caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. She saw what she always saw, an accomplished professional woman who had earned every success through hard work and determination. The same woman who had risen from a modest background to become one of the few black female executives in Silicon Valley. The same woman who regularly closed multi-million-dollar deals and managed global teams. Yet here she was, being treated like an intruder because of her skin color. The elevator arrived at the 20th floor with a soft ding. Karen stepped out into a hushed hallway lined with elegant wallpaper and soft lighting. The presidential suite was at the end of the corridor, a corner unit with spectacular city views, according to the hotel's website. As she slid her keycard into the door, Karen took a deep breath. She thought about tomorrow's conference where she would be a keynote speaker, discussing technological innovations and corporate leadership. None of those attendees would know about this check-in experience, about the small indignities she just endured. The door opened to reveal a stunning suite, but Karen's excitement about the luxurious accommodation had been dampened by the staff's treatment. She wheeled her suitcase inside, closed the door, and allowed herself a moment to process what had just happened. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of what would become a much more challenging situation at the Grand Meridian Hotel. After freshening up in her suite, Karen decided to head down to the hotel's renowned restaurant for dinner. She had changed into a casual but elegant black dress, adding a pearl necklace that had been a gift from her mother. The restaurant, known for its excellent cuisine, was another reason she had chosen the Grand Meridian for her stay. As she walked through the lobby, Karen noticed Bradley Thompson at the front desk. He was a tall man with a stern face, probably in his 50s, wearing a manager's badge. She had overheard other staff members referring to him earlier, and his reputation for being strict with hotel policies seemed well earned from his rigid posture alone. The restaurant experience was pleasant enough, though Karen noticed she waited longer than other guests for service. Still, the food was excellent. A perfectly cooked salmon with roasted vegetables that almost made her forget the earlier unpleasantness. Almost. It was around 9:30 p.m. when Karen finished her meal and began walking back through the lobby. The space had quieted considerably compared to earlier, with only a few guests milling about. She was checking her phone for messages when a sharp voice cut through the quiet atmosphere. "Excuse me, you there?" Karen looked up to see Bradley Thompson striding toward her, his face set in a mask of suspicion. She immediately noticed his aggressive body language, shoulders squared, jaw clenched, hands balled into fists. "Can I help you?" Karen asked calmly, though her heart had begun to race. "What are you doing here?" Bradley demanded, positioning himself between Karen and the elevators. "This is a private establishment. We've had reports of non-guests trying to access guest areas." Karen maintained her composure, despite the implied accusation. "I'm a guest here. I just finished dinner at your restaurant." Bradley scoffed, looking her up and down with undisguised contempt. "A guest? In this hotel?" His voice carried across the lobby, causing other people to turn and stare. "Which room are you supposedly staying in?" "I don't appreciate your tone," Karen replied firmly, "but I'm in the presidential suite. Now, if you'll excuse me." "The presidential suite?" Bradley's laugh was harsh and mocking. "Listen, lady, I've worked here for 15 years. I know every guest in that suite, and you're not one of them. I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately." More people had gathered now, watching the scene unfold. Karen noticed a young couple filming with their phones, while others whispered among themselves. The situation was escalating, but she refused to be intimidated. "Sir, I checked in earlier today. If you check your system." "I don't need to check anything," Bradley interrupted, taking a step closer. "I know what I see, and I see someone who doesn't belong here. Now you can leave on your own, or I can call security to escort you out." Karen tried to step around him, but Bradley moved to block her path again. His hand shot out, shoving her shoulder roughly. The force of it made her stumble backward, her heel catching on the lobby's plush carpet. "Don't touch me," Karen said, her voice steady despite her rising fear. "What you're doing is assault, and it's being recorded." She gestured to the onlookers with their phones. Bradley's face reddened with anger. "Security," he shouted, his voice echoing through the lobby. "We have an intruder." 2 security guards appeared almost immediately, as if they'd been waiting nearby. They approached with hands on their belts, looking at Karen with the same prejudiced assumption as Bradley. "I'm reaching for my room key," Karen announced clearly, making sure the people filming could hear her. She opened her purse slowly. But before she could retrieve her keycard, Bradley slapped her hand, causing the purse to fall. Its contents scattered across the marble floor: lipstick, phone, wallet, and the distinctive golden presidential suite keycard sliding in different directions. The lobby fell silent. Everyone watched as the keycard spun to a stop near Bradley's polished shoes, its golden surface catching the light from the chandeliers above. Bradley's face drained of color as he stared at the keycard, the reality of his massive error beginning to sink in. The security guards froze in place, their confident demeanor crumbling as they realized what had just happened. Karen bent down slowly to retrieve her belongings, her dignity intact despite the humiliation she had just endured. The night was far from over, and Bradley Thompson was about to learn a very expensive lesson about his prejudices. The tension in the lobby was thick enough to cut with a knife. As Karen calmly collected her scattered belongings from the floor, all eyes were fixed on the golden presidential suite keycard that lay mockingly at Bradley Thompson's feet. The security guards shifted uncomfortably, exchanging uncertain glances. Bradley's face had transformed from aggressive confidence to growing horror as the reality of his actions began to sink in. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. The crowd of onlookers had grown larger, their phones still recording every moment of the unfolding drama. "Miss Reynolds." A new voice cut through the silence. Marcus Chen, the hotel's general manager, came rushing across the lobby. He had been alerted by a staff member who recognized Karen from the company's website. I just heard what happened. I am deeply, deeply sorry for this inexcusable incident. Karen straightened up, her purse now reorganized. She looked directly at Bradley, who seemed to have shrunk several inches under her steady gaze. Mr. Thompson here, she said clearly, not only accused me of trespassing but physically assaulted me, all of which has been recorded by several witnesses. Marcus turned to Bradley, his face a mixture of fury and dismay. Mr. Thompson, my office. Now, he then addressed the security guards. You too as well. The three men slunk away, Bradley's earlier bravado completely evaporated. Miss Reynolds, Marcus continued, if we could discuss this somewhere private. Actually, Karen interrupted politely but firmly, I prefer to have this conversation here. She gestured to the gathered crowd. Since my humiliation was public, I think the response should be too. Marcus swallowed hard but nodded. Of course, what happened here tonight was completely unacceptable. Mr. Thompson's actions go against everything our hotel stands for. Does it? Karen asked, her voice carrying across the lobby. Because from the moment I arrived, I've been treated with suspicion and disrespect. The front desk staff questioned my reservation. They made excuses about my credit card. They whispered about alerting security. And now this. The young couple who had been filming stepped forward. We have everything recorded, the woman offered. The way he pushed you and slapped your hand. It's all on video. Thank you, Karen replied, then turned back to Marcus. I'm here to deliver the keynote speech at tomorrow's Tech Innovation Summit. But I'm also here to evaluate this hotel as a potential venue for my company's annual executive retreat. That's a 3-day event for 200 people. She paused, letting the implications sink in. More importantly, I'm here as a human being who deserved to be treated with basic respect. Marcus looked like he might faint. The annual retreat would have brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue. Please, Ms. Reynolds, allow us to make this right. We'll comp your entire stay, upgrade your... He stopped himself, realizing she was already in the best suite. We'll provide any amenities you desire. I don't want free things, Mr. Chen, Karen said. I want accountability. I want change. I want to ensure that no other guest experiences what I did tonight. By now, social media was already buzzing with clips of the incident. The hotel's mentions were exploding with comments and shares. The story was spreading like wildfire through Twitter and Instagram. Of course, Marcus agreed quickly. Mr. Thompson will be terminated immediately. We'll implement additional training. That's a start, Karen interrupted. But not enough. I want to see a comprehensive plan for how you'll address systemic discrimination in your hotel. And I want to be involved in creating that plan. The crowd had grown even larger, with hotel staff members now among the onlookers. Some looked ashamed, others appeared thoughtful, and a few nodded in agreement with Karen's words. We would be grateful for your input, Marcus said, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Perhaps we could meet tomorrow to discuss. I'll have my assistant contact you, Karen said. She picked up her room key from the floor, holding it up so everyone could see it clearly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to rest. I have an important speech to give tomorrow. As she walked toward the elevator, the crowd parted respectfully. Just before the doors closed, she heard the distinct sound of applause starting in the lobby. The night's humiliation had transformed into a moment of triumph, and more importantly, an opportunity for real change. The next morning, Karen woke up to find her phone flooded with notifications. The videos of last night's incident had gone viral, with millions of views across social media platforms. Hashtag Grand Meridian Racism was trending, and major news outlets were already reaching out for comments. Despite the chaos unfolding online, Karen maintained her usual morning routine. She had a keynote speech to deliver, and she wouldn't let Bradley Thompson's actions derail her professional commitments. As she prepared for the day, choosing a striking red power suit, she heard her phone ring. It was Lisa, her executive assistant. Karen, have you seen the news? Lisa's voice was filled with concern. It's everywhere. CNN wants an interview, and the hotel's corporate office has been trying to reach you all morning. I've seen it, Karen replied calmly, applying her lipstick. But right now, My priority is the Tech Innovation Summit. How are things looking downstairs? The conference hall is packed, but Lisa hesitated. There's a crowd of reporters in the lobby. The hotel's PR team is trying to manage them, but it's getting intense. Karen checked her watch, 8:30 a.m. Her keynote was scheduled for 9 o'clock a.m. Have security escort me through the service entrance. I won't give them a media circus before my speech. As Karen made her way through the hotel's back corridors, guided by a nervous young security officer who kept apologizing for his colleague's behavior the previous night, she could hear the commotion from the main lobby. The Grand Meridian Hotel was facing its biggest PR crisis in its 50-year history. The conference hall was indeed full. When Karen entered through the side door, an unusual hush fell over the crowd. Many faces turned toward her, recognition and sympathy in their eyes. The viral videos had ensured that everyone knew what had happened to her just hours ago in this very hotel. Marcus Chen, the hotel's general manager, was waiting nervously near the stage. "Ms. Reynolds," he began, "last night." "Mr. Chen," Karen cut him off politely, "I have a speech to deliver about artificial intelligence and its impact on customer service. We can discuss last night's events afterward." For the next hour, Karen commanded the stage with grace and expertise, delivering her presentation on AI innovation without a single reference to the previous night's incident. Her composure and professionalism spoke volumes, making the hotel's discrimination even more glaring in contrast. After her speech, which received a standing ovation, Karen finally agreed to meet with the hotel's corporate representatives in a private conference room. 3 executives from the hotel chain's headquarters had flown in overnight to handle the crisis. "Ms. Reynolds," began Sarah Mitchell, the hotel chain's chief operating officer, "we want to extend our deepest apologies for the inexcusable behavior you experienced. Bradley Thompson has been terminated, effective immediately." "That's a start," Karen replied, opening her laptop. "But I prepared a more comprehensive proposal." She turned the screen toward them, showing a detailed presentation. "This is a 3-phase plan for systemic change within your organization." The executives leaned forward as Karen outlined her proposals: mandatory bias training for all staff, revised hiring practices to increase diversity at management levels, new protocols for handling discrimination complaints, and regular cultural competency assessments. Furthermore, Karen continued, "I suggest bringing in external consultants to evaluate your current practices. My company's DEI team would be willing to assist, though obviously we'll need to reconsider our plans for hosting our executive retreat here." The executives exchanged worried glances at the mention of the lost business opportunity. The retreat cancellation alone would cost them significantly, not to mention the growing social media backlash and potential legal implications. "These changes won't happen overnight," Karen acknowledged, "but they need to start immediately. What happened to me isn't just about one racist employee, it's about a culture that enabled his behavior at every level." As the meeting concluded, Karen's phone buzzed with another message from Lisa. The video had now reached over 50 million views, and civil rights organizations were calling for a boycott of the hotel chain. What had started as one woman's humiliating experience was becoming a catalyst for institutional change. Walking back to her suite, Karen passed the front desk where new staff members were working, Bradley Thompson notably absent. They avoided eye contact, but Karen held her head high. Sometimes, she reflected, the most powerful response to discrimination wasn't just surviving it was using it to create lasting change. By late afternoon, the Grand Meridian Hotel had transformed into a media circus. News vans lined the street outside, reporters clutched microphones in the lobby, and social media continued to explode with commentary about the viral incident. The hashtag Justice for Karen Reynolds had joined hashtag Grand Meridian Racism in trending topics worldwide. Inside her presidential suite, Karen sat at the elegant desk, reviewing the flood of emails and messages she'd received. Civil rights attorneys offered their services. Morning talk shows requested interviews. Corporate diversity officers from major companies reached out to share similar experiences. The incident had clearly struck a nerve, becoming a symbol of the discrimination that still plagued the hospitality industry. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Lisa, her assistant, carrying a stack of newspapers. "You're on the front page of every major paper," she said, spreading them out on the coffee table. The headlines vary, but all focused on the same story. Executive faces racism at luxury hotel. Hotel staff member assaults black female guest. Viral video exposes hotel's discrimination. The hotel's stock is dropping, Lisa continued, showing Karen her tablet. They've lost 15% since the market opened this morning. Karen nodded, taking in the information. She hadn't wanted this level of attention, but now that it was here, she was determined to use it constructively. Any word from their corporate office about our proposals? They called 3 times in the last hour, Lisa replied. They're ready to agree to all your terms, plus they want to make you the face of their new diversity initiative. Karen was about to respond when another knock came at the door. This time it was Marcus Chen, accompanied by Sarah Mitchell from corporate headquarters. Their faces showed the strain of a day spent in crisis management. Ms. Reynolds, Sarah began, we've reviewed your proposals thoroughly. Our board has approved everything, the training programs, the hiring initiatives, the external audits. We're prepared to commit $50 million to diversity and inclusion efforts across all our properties. Karen raised an eyebrow. And the accountability measures? Yes, Marcus added quickly. We're establishing an independent oversight committee. We'd be honored if you would consider heading it. Before Karen could respond, her phone buzzed with a news alert. A group of black business leaders had just announced they were pulling their conventions from all Grand Meridian properties worldwide, contracts worth over $100 million. Your hotel chain has a choice to make, Karen said, turning her laptop screen to show them the news. You can treat this as a PR crisis to manage, or you can see it as an opportunity for genuine transformation. Which will it be? Sarah stepped forward, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. Ms. Reynolds, I know we can't undo what happened to you, but we want to work with you to ensure it never happens to anyone else, not just in our hotels, but in our industry as a whole. Karen studied them for a moment. She thought about all the times in her career when she faced similar discrimination, the subtle doubts, the not-so-subtle exclusions, the constant need to prove herself worthy of spaces she'd already earned the right to occupy. I'll help you, she finally said. Not for your company's sake, but for every person who's ever been made to feel they don't belong somewhere because of their race. This isn't just about hotels. It's about changing the way we see and treat each other. As Marcus and Sarah left with the framework of an agreement, Lisa remained behind, looking at her boss with admiration. You're turning this whole thing around on them, she said. Making them invest in real change instead of just damage control. Karen walked to the window, looking out at the media crews still gathered below. Sometimes, she said, the best response to discrimination isn't just pointing out what's wrong. It's showing people how to make it right. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from a young black girl who had seen the viral video. Thank you for standing up, it read. I want to be strong like you when I grow up. Karen smiled, thinking about how one uncomfortable night had sparked a movement for change. The presidential suite keycard that had revealed Bradley Thompson's prejudice was now becoming a symbol of something much more powerful, the ongoing fight for dignity, respect, and equality in all spaces. Looking at the city skyline, Karen knew that tomorrow would bring more challenges, more meetings, more decisions. But for now, she allowed herself to feel proud of turning a moment of injustice into an opportunity for lasting change. 1 week after the incident, Karen found herself back at the Grand Meridian Hotel, but under very different circumstances. The lobby that had been the scene of her humiliation was now transformed into a press conference venue. Cameras flashed as she stood at the podium beside Sarah Mitchell and other hotel executives. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter, Karen announced to the packed room. The Grand Meridian hotel chain has committed not just to words, but to concrete actions. She gestured to the large presentation screen behind her, which displayed the comprehensive reform plan. The changes were already visible. New staff members had been hired, including a diverse team of managers. The front desk, where Jessica had once treated Karen with suspicion, was now staffed by people who had undergone intensive bias training. Even the security team had been completely restructured. Bradley Thompson, meanwhile, had become a cautionary tale in hospitality industry training programs. His actions had cost him not just his job at the Grand Meridian, but any chance of working in high-end hotels again. His name had become synonymous with the consequences of unchecked discrimination. Our $50 million initiative, Sarah Mitchell explained to the reporters, will transform not just our hotels, but set new standards for the entire industry. And we are grateful to Ms. Reynolds for guiding this transformation. After the press conference, Karen met with the hotel's new diversity advisory board. The group included civil rights leaders, hospitality industry experts, and former guests who had experienced discrimination. Their first task was reviewing hundreds of past complaints that had previously been ignored or dismissed. These stories are heartbreaking, one board member said, holding up a thick folder. So many people felt powerless to speak up. That's why we're here, Karen responded. To give voice to those who weren't heard and to prevent anyone else from experiencing what we did. Later that afternoon, Karen visited the hotel's training center where new staff orientation was in progress. The trainers were using the viral video of her incident as a teaching tool, and now it was followed by clear protocols for preventing and addressing discrimination. Ms. Reynolds, a young trainee, approached her during a break. I saw what happened to you on social media. It's why I applied to work here, because you forced them to change. Karen smiled, remembering the countless messages she'd received from people sharing similar stories. Her incident had become a turning point, not just for one hotel chain, but for an industry that had long struggled with systemic racism. In her temporary office, ironically, a converted meeting room near where Bradley had confronted her, Karen reviewed the latest progress reports. The hotel's new hiring policies had already increased minority representation in management by 30%. Customer satisfaction scores among minority guests had improved significantly. Your schedule for tomorrow, Lisa said, entering with a tablet. 3 more hotel chains want to consult with you about implementing similar programs. And that's not counting the speaking requests from universities and corporate training departments. Karen nodded, taking in the information. What had started as a horrible experience had evolved into an unexpected platform for change. She was now being called the woman who changed hotel hospitality by industry publications. As evening approached, Karen walked through the lobby one last time before heading home. The space felt different now, more welcoming, more inclusive. New artwork celebrating diversity adorned the walls, and the staff reflected the multicultural city outside its doors. Near the front desk, she noticed a framed plaque that hadn't been there before. It contained the hotel's new mission statement, which began, "We welcome all guests with equal respect, dignity, and hospitality, regardless of race, color, creed." Her phone buzzed with a message from the young girl who had reached out after the incident. She had just been accepted to hotel management school and wanted Karen to know she had inspired her career choice. Looking around the transformed lobby, Karen felt a mix of emotions. The pain of that night hadn't completely faded, but it had been channeled into something powerful and lasting. Sometimes, she reflected, the most important changes come from the most difficult moments. As she walked out of the hotel, several staff members smiled and nodded respectfully. They didn't do it out of fear or obligation, but because they had learned to see beyond their prejudices. And that, Karen knew, was the most significant transformation of all. 3 months after the incident, the changes at the Grand Meridian Hotel had begun to show measurable results. Karen sat in the hotel's newly established Diversity and Inclusion Office, reviewing the latest impact report with her team. The numbers told a compelling story of transformation. Guest satisfaction scores from minority visitors have increased by 85%, reported Michael Torres, the new head of guest relations. And our employee diversity numbers have doubled at the management level. But the most significant changes weren't just in the statistics. The hotel's culture had undergone a fundamental shift. The same lobby where Karen had once been assaulted now hosted weekly cultural awareness events. The restaurant featured themed nights celebrating different cuisines and traditions. Even the art on the walls had been carefully curated to represent diverse artists. We've received over 1,000 applications for our new mentorship program, added Jasmine Wong, the diversity program's coordinator. People want to be part of this change. The media attention had hardly faded. Documentary filmmakers were now working on a feature about the incident and its aftermath. Civil rights organizations cited the Grand Meridian's transformation as a model for institutional change. Other hotel chains were scrambling to implement similar programs. Karen's phone lit up with a notification. It was an email from Bradley Thompson, the first contact since his termination. He had completed an intensive racial sensitivity program and was asking to share his story of learning and transformation. Karen read his words carefully, noting the genuine remorse in his message. "Should we consider including his perspective in our training materials?" asked Lisa, who had read the email over Karen's shoulder. It could be powerful to hear from someone who recognized and changed their prejudiced behavior. Karen thought for a moment. Yes, but not yet. His journey needs to be genuine, not just a bid for redemption in the public eye. Later that afternoon, Karen led a workshop for hotel executives from across the country. The Grand Meridian's boardroom was packed with industry leaders eager to learn from their experience. As she presented the data on improved customer satisfaction and increased revenue, she could see the realization dawning on their faces. Doing the right thing was also good for business. "The incident that brought us here was painful," Karen told them, "but it exposed problems that had existed for years. The question isn't whether these issues exist in your organizations, it's what you're going to do about them." During a break, Karen walked through the hotel's back corridors, where the service staff worked. She noticed how different it felt from that night when she had to sneak through these same hallways to avoid the media. Now, employees of all backgrounds worked together with respect and camaraderie. A young bellhop approached her, somewhat nervously. "Ms. Reynolds, I just wanted to say thank you. My cousin works at another hotel chain, and they've started implementing similar changes because of what happened here." The ripple effects of that night continued to spread. Tourism boards across the country had adopted new anti-discrimination guidelines. Hotel management schools had updated their curricula to include mandatory courses on cultural competency. Insurance companies have begun requiring diversity training for hospitality clients. Back in her office, Karen reviewed the latest initiative, a scholarship program for minority students pursuing careers in hotel management. The Grand Meridian had committed to funding 20 full scholarships each year, with guaranteed internships and job opportunities. "The first round of applications is impressive," Lisa said, handing her the files. "These students could be the next generation of hotel leaders." As evening approached, Karen stood at the window of her office, looking out at the city. The Grand Meridian's logo glowed against the darkening sky, but it stood for something different now. What had begun as one woman's humiliation had evolved into a movement for change that reached far beyond one hotel's walls. Her phone buzzed with another message, this time from a hotel in Singapore, asking about implementing their training program. The transformation that had started here was going global, proving that sometimes the darkest moments could lead to the brightest changes. "Ready for tomorrow's board meeting?" Lisa asked, preparing to leave for the day. Karen nodded, gathering her materials. Tomorrow they would present plans for the next phase of changes. Because she had learned that true transformation wasn't a single moment or program, it was an ongoing commitment to doing better, being better, and creating spaces where everyone truly belonged. 6 months had passed since that fateful night at the Grand Meridian Hotel. Karen stood at the same podium where she had once announced the initial changes, but today was different. The lobby was filled with hundreds of people gathering for the first annual Hospitality Inclusion Summit. "Welcome," Karen began, looking out at the diverse crowd of hotel executives, staff members, and industry leaders from around the world. 6 months ago, this lobby was the scene of an ugly incident. Today, it's the birthplace of a global movement for change in the hospitality industry. The transformation of the Grand Meridian had exceeded everyone's expectations. The hotel had become a case study in successful corporate change, featured in business schools and management textbooks. But more importantly, it had become a different place, one where every guest truly felt welcome. During the summit's opening session, Karen invited a special guest to the stage, the young girl who had messaged her months ago. Now a freshman in hotel management school and a recipient of the Grand Meridian Scholarship, she represented the future they were building. "Sometimes," the student said, her voice strong and clear, "it takes one person standing up to show us all how to be better." The day sessions included presentations from other hotels that had adopted similar programs, testimonials from guests and employees, and workshops on implementing inclusive practices. But the most powerful moment came when Bradley Thompson took the stage. After months of genuine reflection and work on himself, Bradley had become an unexpected advocate for change. He now traveled to other hotels, sharing his story as a cautionary tale and an example of how prejudice could be unlearned. I was wrong, he said simply, his voice heavy with emotion. My actions that night came from years of unconscious bias that I had never questioned. Thanks to Ms. Reynolds' courage, I was forced to confront my prejudices and change. During the lunch break, Karen walked through the hotel's new heritage gallery. The walls displayed photographs and stories from guests and employees, celebrating the diversity that made the hotel special. The viral video of her incident played on a small screen, now contextualized as a pivotal moment in the hotel's journey. We've had inquiries from hotels in 28 countries, Lisa reported, showing Karen the latest statistics. The training program has been translated into 12 languages. The afternoon sessions focused on the future. Karen unveiled plans for a certification program that would recognize hotels meeting strict standards for diversity and inclusion. The Grand Meridian would serve as the flagship training center, hosting hospitality professionals from around the world. This isn't just about avoiding incidents like mine, Karen explained to the audience. It's about creating spaces where everyone feels valued, respected, and welcome. As the summit drew to a close, Karen invited all the hotel's employees, from housekeeping to management, to join her on stage. Together, they represented the real success of the past 6 months, a workplace where diversity was not just tolerated but celebrated. We still have work to do, Karen acknowledged in her closing remarks. Change doesn't happen overnight, but look how far we've come in just 6 months. Imagine where we can be in a year, in 5 years, in a generation. After the summit, Karen returned to the presidential suite, the same one where her journey had begun. The view of the city was the same, but everything else had changed. The hotel's occupancy rates were at record highs. Employee satisfaction scores had never been better. Most importantly, guests of all backgrounds now moved through the lobby with confidence and ease. Her phone buzzed with a message from the hotel's corporate office. They wanted to make the summit an annual event, with next year's gathering planned for their London property. The transformation that had started here was spreading across continents. Looking out at the city lights, Karen reflected on how one painful moment had sparked a movement. The key card that Bradley Thompson had once questioned had unlocked not just a hotel suite, but a door to lasting change. As she prepared to leave, Karen passed through the lobby one last time. The space that had once been the scene of her humiliation now stood as a testament to the possibility of transformation. The Grand Meridian had become more than just a hotel. It was a symbol of what could happen when people committed to real change. "Good evening, Ms. Reynolds," the front desk staff called out warmly as she passed. Karen smiled, knowing that their greeting wasn't just for her, but for every guest who would walk through these doors. The sweet life lesson had been learned, and its effects would ripple through the hospitality industry for years to come.